Hi, I'm Carl.
I'm Jess.
I'm Offie.
And I'm August. Welcome back to our conversation with former FTC Chair Bill Kovacic. We continue our conversation today, him and I, talking about Lina Khan, the new chair of the FTC, and what she means not just for the future of technology or even for the future of competition in the US economy, but what she means for the future of activists, for individuals, for people like us and people like you who want to change the law by understanding the stakes, the social and political implications of antitrust and how to enforce it, and then how to achieve leadership and actually change things, to change the world. We hope you enjoy this conversation, and we'll see you in 20 minutes. And now, one of the heads of this transformational movement, Lina Khan, she sits in the same seat that you sat at the FTC.
At a much younger age, too.
Indeed.
Lina Khan is one of the most astonishing figures of our time in the competition field, but also, I would say, in public policy generally. I spend a lot of time working with other academics and government officials overseas, not simply the United Kingdom Competition and Markets Authority, but through my school, we have a competition law center that I head. We do a lot of work with competition agencies abroad. We do no consulting for private firms, so we have no clientele other than public institutions. In my interaction with them, including conversations earlier this week in Asia, in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa, it is clear to me that Lina Khan is the most famous competition policy person on the face of the earth right now.
Wow.
She is an inspiration to other agencies. She is an inspiration to academics who see this as a promising path. She is an inspiration to younger people who are getting a sense that you do not have to wait until you're 65 years old to put your mark on the world. Chair Khan at the FTC is 32. 5 years ago, she was in a law school classroom in New Haven at Yale. Imagine a conversation she might have had with a recruiter who asked the typical recruiting question, well, Lina, what do you see yourself doing 5 years from now? Imagine if she had answered, I see myself being the chair of the Federal Trade Commission. I don't think she would have ever imagined it at the time. I think if she told that to the recruiter, they would have said, I think we're done now and good luck in your delusional life. Yet that happened. It's fascinating, not simply as a successful effort at public advocacy, Lina and her intellectual cohort, but as an indication, again, of how a new perspective that has deep roots in American antitrust perspective is new again. One of her main themes is, I'm not a radical. The radicals were the people who created these systems. If there are radicals, it is I am conservative in that I am the conservator of the true spirit of that earlier movement, and I want to restore it to our competition policy program. And to an extent that traditionalists and establishment figures like me, been there for a long time, nobody saw this coming. And all of a sudden, to use another metaphor, someone who might have been seen as an insurgent activist trying to get a place on the board, not only got a place on the board, but she chairs the board. Fairly powerful institution. It is very difficult to look across our landscape of public policy making, especially for economic policy, to find anybody in the history of the U.S. antitrust system who's done something in the way that she did. That by itself, just getting to the place where she is now, is an astonishing achievement, regardless of any other matters that she's actually able to bring home in the future.
I remember reading Amazon's Antitrust Paradox, the paper she wrote while in law school that is really a seminal text, or one of the seminal texts of that movement.
Call it more than any other single bit of writing, it is the manifesto.
And I remember even reading the news when she was, well, first appointed to the board and then made chair, I think a couple hours later, and thinking that it inspired me. It changed my view of what was possible. That was hugely inspiring.
Yeah, she's done that in a stunning way. And again, I think if you were to peer into her mind and ask, did you anticipate this? Did you think that even when President Biden nominated you to be a member of the Federal Trade Commission, and as a footnote, being a non-chairman member of the Federal Trade Commission is a world of experience apart from being the chair. One is a more sedate way of life. The other is run for your life every minute. So I don't suspect that even she envisioned that. An interesting question is, at what point did the White House say, by the way, as soon as the Senate confirms you and you are qualified within the meaning of the law, I'm going to designate you to be the chair, which I'm able to do once you're on the board. Just so you know, that goes from, say, being expected to drive the car at 60 miles an hour, at the limit, 55, and suddenly being told, actually, your car is going to be a Formula One racer. How well do you do at 160? So it's an entirely different experience. But all of her work, and she was no ordinary law student. She was a researcher and journalist for years before she went to Yale. And she had studied a lot of industries. That remarkable paper is the consequence of a lot of earlier research. But it is, I think, a stunning indication of what a lot of hard work, insight about how the status quo might have flaws, an instinct about how to challenge the status quo, not necessarily by attacking it head on, not by challenging the fortress directly, but by bypassing it, creating a new community of scholars, information conduits and media outlets, new think tanks and organizations, and to create a true academic community of scholars who say, I don't care if I never get invited to speak at the annual meeting of the American Bar Association section of antitrust law, the inner sanctum of the establishment. I don't care.
Yeah.
And if they never regard me with great respect and admiration, I double don't care, because I have another community that I'm part of that will promote. She didn't do this by herself, to be sure.
Right.
And there are a number of other figures, people like Barry Lynn, who was in some ways her mentor, now heads the Open Markets Institute. There were others who had a hand in this, but they had not just all these characteristics, but they had a very shrewd idea about how to build a strategy that worked. And they had a keen instinct for how the environment had changed to create an environment that enabled fundamental change. And once they saw it, there was no hesitation. To use the Formula One racer example, when you see that space open, you have the blink of an eye to decide whether, if I step on the accelerator, I can get my car through that gap and take the lead.
Right.
When that gap opened, they did it. And now they have pole position in the race. It's pretty astonishing. But it is, I think, it will be a lasting inspiration for many to think, I don't have to settle in life. I don't have to settle. I can achieve remarkable things with drive, insight, imagination, that many things are possible. And that is inspiring. And of course, for those of us who are a bit older, it makes you wonder, what the hell was I doing at 32 anyway? How did I underperform so badly? It makes you wonder how badly you've lagged behind in pursuing one's professional life.
And at 23, it makes me feel, oh man, I've got to pick up the pace.
August, I would say you and your colleagues have to bear down. You have to double the workouts. Because time's running out. You've got 9 years to hit that target. But I think for students, one powerful lesson I take from it is the years you spend in law school are years in which you can accumulate extraordinary intellectual capital. When you write papers, don't write papers just for the sake of turning it in, punching the clock, getting it done. Write something that's going to make a difference. Push yourself. What can I say here that others have not, that will cause people to say, I didn't know that? To treat every day in school as a singular, not to be replicated opportunity to learn and to grow, and to ask, what am I going to do today that's special? By the way, that is a motivation and impulse that people who are, say, almost 69 years old, take on too from watching this experience, realizing that each day is a moment to grow and learn. I see that in her life and what she did as a student. That's a nice model for all of us, a reminder that every morning as you get rolling, it's not, oh, goodness, it's another Monday. I've got classes. How am I going to read all this stuff? The right attitude is, by the time I put my head back on the pillow, at the end of the night, I'm going to be smarter. I'm going to be wiser. And I'm going to put myself that much closer, making a real contribution to the well-being of the world, the community in which I live. And I can do it. I can do something that's really valuable as one person, as part of a community, but it can be done.
Bill, thank you for saying that. I think that that's exactly what Chair Khan has done. And
it's a good lesson for a good lesson for all of us. For,
That's right.
I would say, for young people of all ages. That's a good lesson. And I think it's such a fantastic part of her story. And of course, she isn't finished, but just to appreciate and understand what she and her colleagues have done to this point. And if you had asked people I call the establishment, people have been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
And have a set of views about what's feasible, what's not, what's wise, what's not. 5 years ago, 4 years ago, even a few years ago, she began to ascend. She was seen as a curiosity, but not as a catalyst for basic change. So many of us in the establishment did not really take her that seriously for quite a while. I guess I like to think that I started to notice at an earlier time that this is for real. And it wasn't just Lina Khan, it was others. And you began to see how they were doing it and what they were doing. And you finally realized this is not a sideshow. This is going to be the main event. It could be the main event.
Bill, I'm struck by how, as you said, you were in the very center of the establishment, to use a transformationalist term, I suppose. And you clearly see the importance of Lina Khan in the culture, in our politics, in antitrust. I'm wondering what you think of her program and what she says about the past and what she says about today. Does she have a point?
She does. She does have a point. I mean, the basic point that all of us who were part of the earlier era, those of us who began our careers in the late 70s, those of us who became part of a consensus that she regards very skeptically. I think an important element in one's work in any field is that on a regular basis, you re-examine what you do and what you are, and why you do what you do and how you do it. And what her work and those of her colleagues have done in many ways, again, her intellectual compatriots, is to force the establishment to re-examine first principles and confront basic issues about how our system of governance, our system of regulation operates. And that's ever so healthy for a system. There's nothing more dangerous for an institution or a community than complacency. The tendency, as Learned Hand, great jurist in a famous antitrust case called the United States versus Alcoa, said in 1945, the tendency to let well enough alone, the contentment that can come from existing ways of doing things. And something very healthy is she and her colleagues have brought attention back to those first principle questions. And again, have forced establishment types to consider again whether past policy was really sensible. I have a stake in that. I have not just an abstract stake in it. You can't do these jobs, especially at a high level of these public institutions. You cannot be the chair of the Federal Trade Commission. You can't be the general counsel without a deep commitment, not just of your intellectual energy, but your very emotion, your person. So your emotions, your very personality becomes deeply associated with what you did. And as a consequence, I have a much more sanguine assessment of a lot of that work than she does. And I acknowledge that a good deal of it is the human instinct and tendency to believe that your professional life has not been a wasteland. So I reject the characterization, but I've thought about it a lot more than I did, say, 5 years ago. But I think if there's a weakness in the program, a latent weakness, it's this. When you do fundamental reform, when you are advocating fundamental change in any policy domain, maybe in any area of life, maybe even a business, when you're saying our future, for example, is not the desktop computer. It's not the Mac. That's not the future of our company. Things you put in your pocket. That's going to be our future. That was a very upsetting message when Steve Jobs made that, offered that message. That's disruptive. That's scary. And to press ahead in so many instances, I think requires one to characterize what's gone before as badly deformed, to make the case for change. If I tell you that the house needs a little work, here are areas where it can be improved. Maybe you expand the kitchen, maybe you add a patio in the back. It's a nice house, but it really needs a lot of work. That's not a formula for demolition. That's remodeling. If I want fundamental change, I have to say that place is falling down. It's a menace. And the only way to improve is knock it down and build it up again. Otherwise, they can't motivate legislators to do the demolition, to make the basic change. So much of their rhetorical argument has consisted of saying, it is a wasteland. It's barren. There's nothing to see there. That is a weakness. Because if I'm right, that a number of things we did had real value, they are worth studying very carefully as a way of formulating your own program, how you did it, how you got cases through skeptical courts, how you made investments that gave useful perspectives on what was happening in the economy. And for the people who work for you, there are about 1,200 employees at the Federal Trade Commission. Most people, when they go to work anywhere, like to think that their work has some value. If you repeatedly have told them their work and their professional contributions have no value, that they've been part of a big mistake, that may not be the best way to rally them to work for your cause. I guess what I would plea for is a more careful discernment about the good, the bad, the too hard to sort out, but to assume that there were not significant good things that take place is a real blind spot. I guess put it another way, before you demolish the house, I'd really be careful to see that everybody's out of the house. And is there a precious Picasso original black and white charcoal sketch on the wall that you want to take out first? And maybe a couple of other masterpieces and, a few other gems that you want to keep. And in the sense of desirable historical preservation, notice in many of our cities, you may want to do something else on that site. You cannot knock down the 19th century facade that is there already. You have to keep that. You have to build around it for good reasons. So I'd like to think it is possible to add something new to the mix without destroying it. If you're the new CEO of Kellogg's, you probably don't come in and say, cornflakes, rubbish. What on earth were we thinking? We're not going to make cornflakes. What a big mistake. You come in and say, thank God for cornflakes. Yeah. It's a wonderful accomplishment. I have a new idea. I'm going to put some sugar on them. We're going to call them sugar frosted flakes. They're great. That's what I'm doing. I'm bringing something to the mix. I'm doing something new. I'm going to reposition us, but my goodness, never would I destroy what's good and valuable, because that's worth studying and learning a lot about. That element of the transformation theme is what concerns me the most. And I understand the zeal and the motivation that you have to summon in order to challenge a very well-entrenched establishment of ideas. And that causes you to embrace not only a tendency to say it's all wrong and we've got to fix it, but you have to have an element of righteousness with it too, to challenge formidable opponents, daunting opponents, not to simply believe that your cause is correct, but it is also just. It is a moral cause. Otherwise, it's hard to motivate yourself to do that. And I fully understand that to take those things on is really difficult, requires a special motivation. The concern is that the very force that drives you ahead can be the force that destroys you. That's my concern for the new team.
And I think that's a concern that we should all be thinking about. And Bill, you've given us so much to think about and to talk about and even more questions to ask. And I'm thinking about the public, people out across our country who feel that dilemma that we talked about at the beginning between distrust and convenience, between that zeal that is really undergirding the transformational movement and letting things that work be. But to the public, what's bad about bigness and how do we know when it's bad?
I think part of the larger conversation to have with society, and it's not an excuse to avoid it because you say it's technical or difficult. Just as for an instructor in the classroom, it's not an excuse to say, well, it's too hard for them to understand. The answer to that is it's your job to make it understandable. And if you're saying that it's too hard to understand, maybe you're not doing your job. So a conversation with the larger public that says you need a system of motivation that gives people every incentive to take good ideas and apply them. And that inspiration is healthy. That gets us up in the morning, especially to do things new. Another famous phrase that comes from the learned hand opinion in Alcoa: the successful competitor, having been urged to compete, should not be punished when the competitor succeeds. You cannot have an Olympic Games where you tell Usain Bolt, who did not run in the Tokyo Games, but before that, astonishing series of championships and medals strung around his neck. You cannot tell him when he works ferociously hard and crosses the line first to say, Mr. Bolt, you're going to stand on the second slot in the podium. So what? But I won. It's gold medal, right? So you're discouraging everybody else, Mr. Bolt. Look how disheartened they are. Share this. That's not a good motivation to inspire athletes to do their best. Sport, music, or take your choice. But I think the other message is that your economy in a larger sense has to be permeable. It has to be open to the new ideas. And where large firms go too far is where they rob the system of that permeability, that openness. And that's where a competition system has to bear down. And it is part, I suppose, of a larger policy concern that is reflected in a number of things we do, that in your society, you want there to be a sense that it is fair and that it rewards initiative, that it gives everybody with skills the possibility to realize the fullest expression of those skills, that you want talent wherever it resides, in anyone, in any form, positive talent to step forward and succeed, that the amount of talent and DNA is broadly distributed across the world. And it shows up in people of every sort. And the society that creates an enabling environment in which that talent can emerge and realize, again, its fullest potential will be probably a wealthier society, will probably be more at peace with itself because everyone will think, I got to give it my best shot. I had the opportunity and I did the best I could and I achieved that fullest expression of my skill. But I think the other consequence of that is a political economy that is more united, that is more positive, stable, and committed to the best ideals because everyone will have had a chance to do their very best. And in its own limited way, it's not the complete solution. I would like to say antitrust is the most important thing on earth, certainly in the curriculum. Of course it is, but I'm not going to say it too loudly. But in conjunction with other policies to create those opportunities. At this moment, throughout the United States, across the world, there's the birth of new human beings who have skills and abilities. And will they get to realize them wherever they are in all sorts of different settings? I had a supervisor once in instructing us about how to do interviews when I was with the law firm. And we said, what are we looking for? He said, just talent. And do not bring conventional views about where it is and who's got it to the process. Go find some gems.
That's the kind of society I think I want to live in.
I think in its own way, the message to the larger public is great success achieved by superior performance, hats off, applause, but not behavior that limits the ability of the next generation of great ideas to come forward and to succeed. Thomas Edison had a great idea with direct current. That was amazing. That was an incredible breakthrough in electrification. Mr. Tesla had a better idea. Alternating current was a better idea. That made a big difference to all of us. So you want that society that is permeable in that people have that opportunity. And I think it is a society that will be more at peace with itself, not content in the sense of unambitious, somnolent, complacent, but a sense of inner contentment that comes from the sense that we all have that I had the opportunity to do my best. I tried my best. And if there were others who surpassed me because they had greater skills, I can accept that. And in the world of sport, I think for many athletes, even when they don't succeed, a measure for themselves is, did I do my best? The famous NCAA basketball coach, the famed John Wooden of UCLA, the mentor of many a championship team, is famed for telling his team before games, he did not tell them, go out there and win. He told them, go out there and do your best. That's what I expect. If you do your best, a lot of things will take care of that themselves. But do your best. In the sense that when we have done our best, we've had the opportunity to do our best, that's a sense of personal fulfillment. It does not, in an absolute sense, have to surpass everyone else. I think we can accept the idea that there are others who do what we do better in some ways, and we marvel at that. But I'd like to have the chance to achieve our fullest potential. And antitrust in its own humble way, I think for our citizens, is seeking to create that kind of environment, which has significance. It's more than just putting a few extra dollars in the pockets of consumers. It's putting perhaps some real capital into their souls that carries them ahead.
Bill, that was inspiring on a personal and an intellectual and policy level. And I think you've really changed how I think of antitrust and you've made it more holistic. And I'm so excited to report back to the rest of the team about this conversation. Thanks so much for it.
I'm so grateful for the chance to do it. And again, when I look at I'm getting ready to teach in a week from Monday. And one thing I ask my students to do for my classes, and I have an antitrust class, is give me your resumes. And as I look through all of them, it gives me great hope for the future because those abilities are there. The obvious commitment and drive is there. It's the face of a better future. The problems are daunting. They'll need everything they can bring to it, but it makes me hopeful in the face of occasionally bad news to think these people are up to it. They can do it more than I was when I was in their position. So
we're going to do our very best.
There's reason to be optimistic because there's just so many young people with astonishing skills, abilities who can carry us ahead, who can do it. It can be done.
August, great interview. I must say I'm very impressed by your interviewing skills.
Thank you.
And even more so, incredibly inspired. It's funny, I feel like it's very empowering to see Bill, who's quite unlike me in many ways, get the same spirit from Lena Icon. The fact that she is a woman, the fact that she is an Asian American, the fact that she is 32, 33, and the fact that she has shown us, it's kind of why we do this podcast. It's this ability. We're afraid that people won't have the opportunities to live their best lives.
What I also found impressive when we were doing research for this episode, I went ahead and read her original article in the Yale Law Review. I just found it impressive that she would even go out and, while still a student, I believe, just do this in-depth research and write an article and build a platform around that article. That to me also, as a law student who's still learning a lot, it feels empowering to me that even in this stage of our careers, we can really go out there and start building a platform.
Bill actually changed my view of Lena Icon a little bit. I was already hugely inspired by her, as I think we all were, but Bill connected her own story, a life of empowerment, a life where she seized a problem, she saw an issue, she saw her own skill, and she pushed herself to the max, and with great success, but also with equally high risk of failure. Mm-hmm. And that kind of feeling on a societal level, socially, is very important to Bill. And it's also why bigness is bad to him.
Because what I felt when we were in that before we started this class,
Right.
I felt there.
Right.
I felt this insecurity.
Yeah, that insecurity, that deep desperation that comes from feeling like the obstacles are insurmountable and that the advantages are impossible to overcome when it comes to fighting your opponents or finding a seat at the table and getting your say. That when a society is permeable, because there is because bigness is capped. When society is permeable, it's at peace with itself. It's not somnolent or complacent, but it's a society where everyone has a chance to try their best and that they know it and they feel it. And that's good for the peace of a society and the wealth of a society in general. That's why bigness is bad.
Thank you guys so much for joining this second part of Antitrust, what might turn into a longer series depending on your feedback. And speaking of that feedback, we'd love to hear what you guys think, either on social media platforms. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, and we're also on Patreon, which provides a unique opportunity for listeners to support this project if they feel like they are getting value from it and if they're in the position to do that. But yeah, just please subscribe, share with your friends, and let us know what you think. Thanks.